This pattern can be found in my Etsy shop, linked in the description below. This pattern has two decorative options. You can either do a speckled egg, or you can make an egg with a smiley face. You can also omit either one of those and just make a plain egg. If you're going to do the decorative options, you'll need the templates with the marking placement. Using the template as a placement guide, you're going to use a marking tool and mark the placement for each of the speckles or the smiley face on the right side of one egg piece. Pin each one individually in place, that way they don't move while we sew them on. Using a matching thread, edge stitch around each felt piece. Whether you're doing the speckles or the smiley face, each one needs to be attached. You want to be on the edge of the felt but still catching it in the stitches. These pieces are really small, so take your time and don't be afraid to leave the needle in the fabric and pick up the presser foot to readjust to make sure that you are staying on top of the felt. Lay one egg piece on top of the other with right sides together. Pin this in place. If you added any felt decorations, they will be sandwiched on the inside of this. Sew all the way around the plushie with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, leaving about a 1 inch gap on the bottom side. This will help us be able to turn it right side out. Now that it's sewn, turn the plushie right side out through the gap left from sewing. You can do this either with your fingers, you can just reach inside and grab it, or you can use a turning tool. After the plushie is turned right side out, you're going to reach into the gap and use a blunt tool. Some people use a chopstick, I'm using a turning tool, and you're just going to want to push out all the curves from the inside of the plushie. This helps it takes its shape, and while you're doing this, you can check to see if you got all the seam allowance in your stitches. Make sure there's no holes. Now you're going to stuff the plushie with polyfill. You can either use your hands and your fingers to get it in there, or you can use your turning tool. So how much polyfill you use will kind of determine the shape that the plushie takes. Sometimes you're going to need to smash it down or massage it a little bit to help encourage that polyfill to take a different shape. When the plushie is stuffed to your liking, tuck the seam allowance from the gap inside the plushie. Take a needle and matching thread and hand sew the gap closed using a ladder stitch. If you're not familiar with a ladder stitch, you just start with one small stitch on one side of the fabric, then move directly across to the other side. You're just going to keep going back and forth from one side to the other, kind of like making rungs on a ladder. That's why it's called a ladder stitch. Tie a few knots in the end of the thread, and then you're going to stick the needle through the seam, through to the other side of the plushie, and clip the thread off. This will ensure that the tail of the thread stays tucked inside the plushie for a more secure finish. Then that's it, you're all done! Your plushie is ready to be played with, squished, and loved on. Thank you so much for following along on this pattern. If you enjoyed this pattern, please feel free to take a look at some of my others in my Etsy shop. The link is in the description. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.